Back here on CBS Sports HQ, where this college football Saturday brings us a pivotal Big Ten showdown at noon in Columbus when Ohio State hosts undefeated Indiana. It's number 5 versus number 2 in a game that has a ton of playoff implications on the line. For more on just how big of a game this is, let's turn things over to our own Mackenzie Brooks. Hey, Mackenzie.
Hey, you just mentioned it. Massive, massive game, right? I mean, winning this game, Indiana-Ohio State, is essentially punching in your ticket to that Big Ten championship game. Now, with Ohio State being minus 105 to win the Big Ten, it makes you think odds makers really think they're going to win this game against Indiana this weekend, and that's exactly what we have here. Now, the key for Indiana that has been talked about all week is how they lose. What is the style that they lose this game? And that's where we start to really punch the numbers. Okay, what's a blowout? What is considered a good loss? What's considered not a good loss? So the margin we're working with right here is around 20 points. So if you keep this game within 20 points, now mind you, the spread's 13.5, but we'll call a blowout 20 points. If you keep it within that 20, if this is a quote-unquote good loss, which is around a 70% chance to happen, that is what we think your chances are to make the playoff. Now, if this is a blowout, if you do not look good here, then you're really down to a coin flip to make the playoff, because the committee has to decide if that loss doesn't look good, are you a high caliber team? Now, I do want to give them their flowers. If they do win, this is not impossible. Crazier things have happened in college football, obviously locking in a 96.2% chance to make it. But if they don't, say hypothetically we're in this situation and they don't make the college football playoff because of the way they lose this game. Now we have this one whole team that has to be dispersed somewhere else. And that's where all the arguing that's been happening this week, some of us are getting thrown under the bus, starts to happen. So what you're looking at here is with Indiana here at that 7 seed. Now, if we take out Indiana, say this is not a good loss, they lose this game, and we take them out, who really does that go to? A good chance that goes to a 5th SEC team. Now, I know Danny's already over there with his blood boiling, but that is a very likely, probably 30 to 40% chance that's where it goes. Or odds makers are implying maybe the ACC looks a lot better than we thought. Maybe we want the ACC runner-up. This could be Miami. It could be SMU. But if we're taking out this Indiana, this is what we start to open up. An SEC team, an ACC runner-up. And maybe if the AAC stays competitive, maybe that goes to Tulane if other nonsense starts to happen. So that is where this Indiana spot would start to spread if we do not see them have a nice win or a nice loss against Ohio State.
All right, let's go ahead and dissect this a little bit further as we say hello to our own Danny Kanell and also former Ohio State Buckeye, our own Cardale Jones. And Cardale, I'll start with you first here. Should Indiana still make the CFP with a loss this upcoming weekend against Ohio State?
You know, Mackenzie made some great points about how they lose if they don't get this win. It's going to be a lot of questions about that strength of schedule, and you finally playing a quality opponent, and you wasn't able to stand up versus another blue blood like these other teams are going to be in the top 12. So I think it all depends if and how they lose is going to give them the best chance to make to the college football playoff. Now, and I know Kirk Cincinnati and that Indiana team is watching us right now and saying, oh, they're not talking about the things that we're going to go out here and actually do and actually go into Columbus and get this win. And all of those stats and all of those what-ifs goes out the window. Clearly, they take care of business in Columbus.
I totally agree, Cardale. Like, I don't think Kirk Cincinnati's talking at all. He's not. His mindset isn't let's keep it close. His mindset is let's game plan to go on the road and keep winning and keep this ball rolling. But I think it's interesting, the number that Ken's gave there, like within 20 points. The reason I think it's important to keep it in there and probably closer to like 14 to 17, because if you look at the Texas Longhorns, whose resume is very similar to what Indiana's is, it is not great. Their best wins are against Vanderbilt and Colorado State, the only teams they played with a winning record. They lost to Georgia at home. So that to me is the barometer where they lost. It didn't look good. It was a 15-point loss at home. Indiana needs to go look at this and say, all right, well, we need to keep it at least in that vicinity so we can have the same comparable schedule as Texas does. Also, I know Kenzie likes to forget about this game as much as she would like. Georgia lost by 18 to Ole Miss. So you've got another team that's in this conversation that has a loss. That's it, and it's their second loss. Oh, by the way, but you have those two other teams that are in this conversation that if we're going to start judging losses and holding up, how many points you can lose by, you've got other teams in this conversation where I think they should at least be able to stay in that vicinity. So like 14, 18, I think Mackenzie's under 20 is probably accurate. I think it is critical that Indiana keeps it in there.
And do you believe you're in agreement here with it? It kind of matters with the style of which they win or lose.
Yeah, I think you'll know when you see it, right? But I mean, when I say that, Georgia looked awful against Ole Miss. Texas looked awful against Georgia. So I think you better be careful because there is very much a recency bias. We are close to Selection Sunday. The committee is watching these games. So if it looks a little sideways, and let's say Ohio State's winning by 24 most of the game, and Indiana scores a garbage time touchdown when most of the country's probably turned the channel and moved on, then I think it's like all bets are off the table. There's no magic number that you can keep the score within. So I think it does matter how they look going against Ohio State.
All right, Cardale, I do want to come back to you here because Mackenzie is back with us here
I got some words
on the desk, and she's ready to rock and roll here. So let's stick with Indiana because if they do lose, it could potentially open up some doors for other teams. Mackenzie detailed this out to us a little bit earlier in a potential 5th SEC team getting into the college football playoff. Just what are your thoughts on that?
Not a chance. And I like for the fact that SMU get that first bid to be the first team in if Indiana goes out here and get blown out, because if SMU went out, and we're saying Miami is in that top 4 spot because they won the ACC, which means they will beat SMU. SMU will be a 1-loss conference runner-up over a multi-loss conference opponent where they're not even in the SEC championship game. So I think with that resume there, and I will argue that SMU has more impressive wins than Tennessee in that scenario, just because first year in the ACC, going into a tough environment like Louisville, beating them and blowing out a top team as in Pitt at home. So their resume speaks better for their bid to get that 12th spot if Indiana goes out here and get blown out, versus Tennessee, who's going to end their season with some games that we're not going to care too much about, because a lot of things have to happen for them to even make it to the SEC championship game.
All right, I'm going to give Kenzie. I'm going to give her chance here. The floor is yours, Mackenzie. What do you respond to that? Because he said no chance.
Well, I don't like that it feels like you guys are just acting like the entire pie is based off your record. Like, yeah, 10-0 Indiana. If that's all we're talking about is your record, then they would be tied number 1 in the country. But we have to act like strength of schedule does matter here. Like Tennessee, 31st in strength of schedule. Indiana 103. Like, that is a vast difference. So if the one thing separating you at the end of the day is 11-1 versus 10-2, that is a small margin when Tennessee has this massively gauntlet of a schedule relative to Indiana. Like, if Indiana, the best thing, the highest hook they can hang their hat on this season is covering an over double-digit spread against a team that's ranked 3 spots ahead of you, and that's your big claim to fame, and that's why we're putting you in a playoff, it's because you're covering a spread against a team that's 3 spots ahead of you. That's my problem, putting them in over Tennessee, because that is the best, most impressive thing they've done this season.
I feel, because we've always done this, what could Indiana have done against Tennessee's schedule? I feel pretty confident they could have lost to the same teams that Tennessee did. And I think there's a chance they could have beaten Bama at home when Bama was not playing that great and Jalen Milroe was hurt. Bama did not look like a playoffs game in that one. And I think Indiana's most impressive is not necessarily just the 10-0. It's the way they aren't squeaking by their opponents. They have been dominating everybody on their schedule, which I do think is impressive. If they were eking by some of these lesser opponents, then I think it would be potentially more of an issue. But they have been dominant against everybody except for Michigan.
But I don't know how you can be so high on this team and excuse their schedule, and you're okay with Indiana, but you're upset with a team like Notre Dame. You're always upset with Notre Dame.
Oh, I am upset with Notre Dame because I don't think they have one great win in Texas A&M. Other than that, they have only played 8 Power 4 opponents.
It's the same cakewalk schedule, and one you're okay with and one you're not. Are you okay with Notre Dame being the 6th best team in the country right now?
But Notre Dame has a loss to Northern Illinois, something that Indiana doesn't have. Like, Indiana played some cakewalk teams that are exactly like Northern Illinois. They blew them out by 40, 50 points.
So if Indiana loses, period, do you think they should be in?
I think they should, but I'm very well of the reality. That's why we're having this discussion, that they need to keep it within that 2-3 touchdown margin.
See, I think that could be the reality. I just don't don't think it's still a just reality if that means you're leaving out an SMU or you're leaving out a 10-2 Tennessee or Ole Miss or Georgia, whichever it is. This isn't like, I'm not here to defend Texas specifically or try to defend the SEC. I'm trying to defend teams that have one less loss than Indiana with a massively tougher schedule that has to be accounted for, because if we go into a situation where strength of schedule doesn't matter, all these SEC teams should just become Notre Dame's. Get out of a conference, be independent, make your own cakewalk schedule if that's what you're going to be rewarded with.
Which I agree, because like, look at Clemson. Clemson, if they did not play against Georgia, like erase that game from your memory and played one of the cakewalks they did, either Notre Dame or even Indiana did, and Clemson's probably in. They're in the conversation as a one-loss ACC team, but they schedule that. We need continuity in scheduling, is like my point.
There's so many routes that we can kind of take here. Cardale, I got to jump in, or you know very much that these two will go all day talking, going head to head. So I do want to get give you a chance to respond here to what they were saying.
You know what? It's tough to. I mean, strength of schedule is real, but at the end of the day, you only can play the teams that's on your schedule, and that also plays an effect of your conference. Do I think the SEC from top to bottom is a little bit better conference than the Big Ten? I do think so. I think it's no argument there. You look at the quality opponents on a larger scale versus the quality of the top 4 to 6 opponents in the Big Ten. It doesn't compare, but it's hard to give Indiana credit for their schedule, and there's only one way you can do so. You can look at what they did versus teams like Northwestern versus teams like Nebraska, where they dominated these teams, where Ohio State didn't have their best showing versus these teams, right? So I think Ohio State beat Nebraska was in a position to beat Ohio State with Dylan Raiola throwing an interception for the Buckeyes to seal the game at home. Indiana destroyed Nebraska at home, and Ohio State came out slow versus Northwestern this past week, where Indiana boat raced them as well comfortably. So you look at that comparison as well, and you talk about their strength of schedule. Well, they're handling the things they're supposed to handle.
All right, Cardale, thanks so much for joining us. We have to hit a break. We have neared the end.
Saturday morning.
But more. You know what? Why don't you just take the promo here? Do my job for me. No, look at this. You'll hear more from us. How about 3 hours of this kind of talk on Saturday morning? It's our college football pregame show. We'll have all the highlights, news, analysis that you could want, taking you all the way up to the noon kickoffs. Coverage begins this upcoming Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern.